Okay. Good afternoon and evening and morning, depending on where you are. We are so pleased to welcome everyone to the Creating the Future January 2015 meeting of the Board of Directors. We have a group here. We will shortly be joined by other people who will be attending the meeting, but we are happy to all be together here in this virtual meeting space, as well as others who might be joining us via Twitter or via the Walking the Talk blog. I will say in a moment how best to participate, but for now, I just want to start us by acknowledging that Creating the Future envisions a world where everyone is living well individually and collectively, bringing out the best in each other and in our communities. We know such a future is possible simply because it is not impossible. To accomplish that, our 10-year mission is to change the questions embedded in the day-to-day work of individuals and organizations so that everyone naturally brings out the best in one another and in our world. Always the best way to start a meeting. Right? Reflecting on that wonderful piece of, it's not sentiment, this is a reality that all of us are working to create.
Sounds like you've said that before.
Yeah. I have said that many times before. Growing and growing. Folks, we have a full agenda for ourselves today, but we have the strong belief that there will be people participating with us via our Walking the Talk blog. So if that's you, we want to remind you that the best way to offer your input is through the Twitter hashtag CTFuture. And we are excited to have all of the people who are watching contribute the next piece, which is a traditional way that we start meetings with Creating the Future, which is to welcome our guests and to welcome one another with a go-around where we talk a little bit about what has been absolutely amazing for you in the last 4 weeks, 1 month. And we certainly want to encourage people to talk about the things that you might have been seeing in and around the work that you've been doing that show the impact of not only your work but also the work of this change in approach, where we're changing the questions so that organizations and groups can start to make the changes that they have been dreaming about. So, having said that, and welcoming all of you here, who would be liking or willing to start our go-around? How about you, Alex? Because your picture is right there on my screen.
The curse of the alphabetical. Sure, happy to start. I'll share one personal, one professional one. First of all, great to see everyone. Nice to kick off the year all together. Yeah. The professional one is I just finished watching a video put together by Start Some Good, which is the organization I co-founded with a Creating the Future fellow, Tom Dawkins. And it was a celebration of the impact that the organization had in 2014. It's a crowdfunding site for social entrepreneurs where they passed $3.5 million raised to all kinds of great organizations around the world. So really fun to see the diversity of good that's being started by them. I'm very proud of his leadership. Then on the personal side, had an amazing 3 weeks back in California. I'm based in Stockholm, Sweden, but such a pleasure to be back in California, to get sun, to get good Mexican food, and just rejuvenate after a great, inspiring year, and to really get ahead to the 2015. So feeling really excited to be back, really rejuvenated for time in California, and ready to go.
Beautiful.
Awesome.
Wonderful. I will go next. I'm Hilda Gottlieb with Creating the Future, and located in a little bit cloudy Tucson, Arizona today, but I will not tell anybody what the temperature is because you guys will just get pissed off. A personal and a professional. Personal is that I am finally almost over the cold that knocked me out towards the end of the holidays, and so it feels nice to be back. After a small kick in the teeth, it feels good to be back up. Professional is I could not be more excited about every single thing that Creating the Future is doing. You spend usually the end of the year in reflection about what you've accomplished in the past year, and last year was one of those sort of infrastructural years. We sort of go through, 2013 was this boom program, and last year we put so many amazing infrastructure pieces in place, and this year is going to be another one of those watch out, the train is going so fast you may miss it as it goes past. Amazing, amazing years, and I'm just really, really excited about every single thing that we're doing. So that's mine. Everything is awesome.
How about you, Dimitri?
Personal, we had on New Year's Eve snow in Tucson, Arizona. And not much, and I realized to the rest of the world this is like, yeah, so what? But for here, it is a big deal. We had big snowflakes that were coming down. Of course, being Tucson, not much of it stuck on the ground. But nonetheless, it was quite awesome and kind of a nice way to kick into the new year. So a different way of doing that. So that's my personal. And professional, I have to concur with Hildy that looking forward to this year in a really amazing way. I, too, have been battling a cold, so I know that Justin was saying that the new year starts when the new year starts, but I think officially the new year starts when we decide it starts, and we've decided it started today. So Happy New Year, everybody, and really glad to be kicking off our professional work with this board meeting today. This is amazing.
Thank you. Justin Pollock, I see you. You're next in my list.
Okay. I'll jump in. Unless, Dimitri, did you have something to add there?
No, I was just going to ask Gail, but she already asked you. So.
Okay. Well, I think for me, the awesome that I've been reflecting on is, that I made the choice that in working for the community, I wanted to do that on my own. And I am grateful for people that are both in this space right now and others who do it in partnership with me, because it's not always easy. And having folks to turn to reflect with, to bounce ideas off of, to be inspired by, to reaffirm the work that's being done, and to help just think through things, because sometimes you just need to think through. And Renji, what you were talking about before we stopped with Pine, in terms of just sometimes you need to get the idea out. And so I'm appreciative of the partners that I'm lucky enough to have contact with.
Wonderful.
Hi, Carl. Uh-oh. Carl, we can't hear you. Try again.
He's muted.
You're muted totally.
He's looking sharp in that suit, though, huh? Even muted.
Yeah.
I know. Maybe that's why he's muted, is he looks so good. If we heard the sound, we'd just all die.
We can play Sharp-Dressed Man in the background.
While you figure that out, can we move on to you, Renji?
Sure. First of all, thank you for having me. It's been a while since I joined Creating the Future board meeting, so I'm really excited to be here. I think I'll do personal and professional as well, too. On a personal note, I'm with you, Alex. I just got back from LA this past Sunday. I was there for a week, and the weather was unbelievable. And I'm here in Toronto. I'm looking out my window, and it's pretty. It's like a snow globe, but it's really cold. And I'm just like, oh, to be back in the California sunshine. So that's that. I think the second thing, on a professional note, at Igniter, we released an app, as I was mentioning to some folks just before this call started, an app called Pine. And the whole idea behind Pine is this notion that it provides you a space to just take a step back and check in on how you're doing every day. It's really simple in its design, simple in its application, so that you just take a few seconds to just check in, how am I doing today? And then should you choose to do so, you can write a quick reflection on how you're doing. And that's all private. That's all for you. You can add friends on Pine to help you make it a habit where you can nudge each other. And I think the professional and even the personal insight that I got was that going into 2015, I've been checking in on Pine 60 days straight now. And it's one of those things where I've entered 2015, everything is still the same as it was last year. Things are just as hectic. Things are just as busy. And there seems to be so many things moving. But I'm a lot more aware, a lot more mindful, and I'm going into this year with a lot more intention. And I think a lot of that really has to do with just taking a step back every day to just check in. You know, it's okay to feel happy, sad, frustrated, angry, because we're humans and we have these wide range of emotions that we can feel. And to acknowledge that and then to be able to see that is pretty cool. So I'm really excited about where Pine could go, and yeah, that's mine. So.
It's fabulous.
I'm looking forward to experiencing Pine.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yeah,
I can hear you.
I have no idea what the problem was then. Happy New Year, everyone. I hope you're all well. The big sort of work thing for me at the minute, sort of looking forward, is that we've got what we call a general election, equivalent to your presidential election this coming year. So we've been doing a huge amount of work in terms of trying to help non-profits or charities prepare for that. But related to that, we're also, I think I talked to you about this last time, charities in this country are coming under quite a lot of attack at the moment. People are complaining about executive director salaries, for example. They're saying that charities are not very transparent, and we've been doing quite a bit of work to help organisations not so much fend off those difficult questions, but actually to ask themselves quite good questions about, well, are we transparent actually? And we've been getting some good feedback on that, and I think we're doing an awful lot to sort of try and make things better. Good.
That sounds amazing.
Year, everyone.
So you have a busy year ahead.
I think we do. One of the difficult things, though, I think for us is possibly one of the difficult things for me is part of me sort of thinks actually the problems that I think we're trying to help organisations with, whoever is going to be the next government or the next Prime Minister, you might argue that they can't do anything to help them. And actually I think one of my big challenges, one of my personal challenges going forward is how do you help organisations recognise that quite often the answers that we're looking for, we've got to look to ourselves for those answers. No one is going to come along, no white knight is going to come along on a silver horse and sort some of those problems out. So it's about trying to change the mindset and thinking about how do we look to ourselves for solutions rather than looking elsewhere.
I know we're doing awesomes, but I just have to dovetail on that because I'm living that experience of when people talk about advocacy, what they really mean is lobbying, which is making it so someone else gives me something. And I'm really struggling with some organizations I'm working with in that space that you're just talking about, Carl. How do we reframe advocacy to really mean the capacity for people to speak for themselves and execute on their own? So I'm sorry, I know that was a digression from the awesome, but I just wanted to connect to how much that rang true to me just right now.
Good conversation for a future board meeting. Okay, thank you. Well, in the absence of Mark and Sydney, who I've sent a note to just to see what the scoop is with them, hoping that they will arrive, I'll wrap us up in the awesomeness department by saying that I too have a personal and a professional. Professionally, the number of groupings that I have seen coming together of consultants who want to be in some kind of community setting together has been fascinating, and I'm sure that I'm quite sure that it's existed in lots of places, in lots of ways, long before I started to notice them. But I'm participating in a couple right now that are really interesting to me, and a group of people who want not only to increase their skills and to feel connected to each other, but one in particular who has stated that its core purpose is a group of people who are devoted to community impact and community change. So that's something I haven't seen before, and I want to see how it grows and see what I can do to support it. So that's pretty exciting for the beginning of a new year. And professionally, it was such an amazing time to have holiday time with family, which, you know, have a huge family, and so when we come together, it's it's an event. But this year we were joined by someone brand new to our family and had such a lovely time with a beautiful young man, 21 years old, who just lost his mom, and he spent the Christmas break with us. And there's something to be said for introducing somebody to a family and them walking away feeling like they were part of something at the end. So we were really grateful to be able to be that link for him. And that's us. That's awesome. All of us. Yeah. I'll let you know if I hear of anything back from Mark and Sydney, but I think perhaps we'll go on and carry on with this conversation. We today are focusing on one particular topic, which is the ways that Creating the Future wants to grapple with intellectual property and building community around that topic. Are there other things that board members would like to ensure, if not on today's agenda, that on a future agenda we pay some attention to? Okay.
I would just like to add in, it's not about a future meeting, but it's about our December meeting, I think. November meeting, I can't keep up, but it was, I think it was December when we formed a working team to work on evaluation. I want to just share with you guys the power of our meeting and sharing our meetings online. Somebody who has participated in various of our meetings, Stacey Ashton, who is in Vancouver, mentioned that she is also looking at revamping how their volunteer center does evaluation, and went back and listened to all of our meetings and used that as a way of starting to form her own questions, and got so excited about what she's framing, which is so similar to what we're framing, that I've asked her to be part of that work group that's going to form our questions. So it's just, sort of not looking at what do we want to talk about in the future, Gail, but just really excited about what came out of that last meeting that I just wanted to share with folks.
Mm-hmm.
It's working. It's working. One of the things that I did over the break was I have been working with on submitting an article to an academic journal on our being open like this, and I've been working on revisions easily 6 months to a year with them, back and forth and back and forth, and I sort of, it's hard not to be glib in saying that one of the results of opening the doors is that people walk in. But that's how I felt with Stacey and that whole conversation. Is, oh, look at that. You want people to walk in, it helps if you open the door. So, yeah. So, sorry, I just wanted to interject that. It was a past meeting, not a future meeting, but it will be a future meeting.
That is okay, and it brings to mind the conversation that we had sometime in the fall, I've forgotten which month, where we talked about tools for reporting, and we are due to, I think, continue that conversation or that work because what you just did reminds me that we have not yet actually defined that tool, and it is always so invigorating, Hildy, to hear you tell the stories of the things, the connections that you're making, things that have happened that are as a direct result or sometimes an indirect result of the conversations that happen here in this space. So it's actually more important perhaps than we're letting on at this moment, but thanks for sharing that story. Mm-hmm. Actually, I'm thinking at this moment that it's not a tool, it's simply a time in our agendas where we should dedicate to that very thing. We mentioned it at the beginning, if there's anything that you have seen that's been happening that's related to the impact of what we're doing.
Yeah, maybe make it separate.
Yeah,
maybe.
Well, it becomes awesome for the organization. So the organization,
yeah.
It's the awesome for Creating the Future.
Okay, so we'll make sure that is in the monthly agenda. Is there any objection to that? Maybe I should be polling you guys first. No, I'm not hearing any objections. Okay, good. Good.
Justin has his permanent smile photo, so that means yes, he agrees.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. And I think it's fair for the people who are watching who may not be seeing this as we're doing it, but perhaps come by another day to look. Sometimes when people switch off their camera, it's because in our time zone, it's noon. It's lunchtime. So people are having their lunch, or they're doing something that they perhaps wouldn't want necessarily you to have to watch them do. So it's not that they're not paying attention. It's simply that they're eating. Okay.
Gail, I want to remind folks who are watching that doing a check-in gives us great feedback. So even if it's just I'm here and I'm watching, it's wonderful.
And just use the hashtag CTFuture so we know.
Yes, that's right. Perfect. We have one item in our consent agenda, which is the minutes of the December 2014 meeting. You've had a chance to review those minutes. Any changes that you might have noticed need to be made? Okay. Are there any objections to those minutes becoming our official document from that meeting?
No.
Okay, hearing none, I consider those approved by consensus. We've already established that our agenda today is going to be intellectual property, and this is a topic with a long history, and with us that comes out of our very distant and our more immediate past. And I'm thinking, Hildy, that perhaps you would like to frame this conversation somewhat, considering it has a lot to do with topics that we've talked about before and the work you specifically do.
You know what's really interesting is that as I have been talking about this topic online, inviting people to come to this meeting, and I'm really sorry, I'm going to just keep coughing throughout the meeting, and I apologize for that. This is resonating at so many levels, and you know, we sort of say that we've talked about this a lot. Alexandra used to bring it up all the time in the early days, and it was always under the guise of how do we protect, because that's what you get. The question that immediately comes is how do you protect intellectual property, which is a very old sort of way of looking at it. The thing that I found in sharing, announcing this meeting and inviting people to this meeting is how many people have said this is like one of the most important topics in the world right now, because as we are looking at a completely different way of being, given the internet, given the sharing economy, given everything that's going on, we're in such transition in terms of understanding the value of sharing intellectual property, and I really hate that word, but we don't have anything else. We'll use it as a placeholder term. There's such value in sharing and building upon, which is what we've done for millennia. We build upon, you know, the giants that came before us. It is only a recent phenomenon where we put deeper and deeper and higher walls around that and say it's mine, you can't touch it. And so that's always been the balance that we're trying to look at here. How do we encourage people to share, especially in an organization like ours, where the whole reason for being is that these ways of thinking become ubiquitous, but it is also, you know, quote unquote, intellectual property is not about the thing, it's always about the people. How do people feel about sharing their stuff? How do people feel about, for instance, the thought that somebody could take their stuff and say it's theirs. So, you know, take your stuff, Gail, and I could say, oh, I said this thing that actually you said. There's a whole range of issues that come up that are on the personal side. So there's the organizational mission side, which is we're about sharing and making these things ubiquitous. Mm-hmm. And then there's the personal side of the people who are actually creating all of the thinking and saying, okay, but I got personal stuff in that, and how do we balance that? So I think that's probably what has happened over time. I know that when Alexandra would bring it up in the early days, it was about protecting the people who created it. And so that comes from a very personal protection sort of feeling as well. And so I think that there's that balance between the people part, because everything's always about the people, it's never about the thing. How do we feel about it versus what do we really want to accomplish, and how do we balance that?
Mm. Can you perhaps, just to give the board members a bit of context around the history of any property that Creating the Future perhaps has created, and what has been done with it out there in the big wide world?
Well, creating the future was built upon initially my intellectual property. So all of the thinking that began this organization came out of here. And with the brilliance of our fellows primarily, but also this board discussion and other venues, that thinking has continued to evolve. It has evolved where there's some of that folks feel was created by the community that is creating the future and the fellows. There's also further intellectual property that I have developed from here that I have shared with our community. So that again, the intent being that it be shared, but what does that mean? So does that answer your question, Gail? I'm not sure if that...
Yeah, are there places where you have seen material shared in a way that's really, that you would consider really positive? Are there ways that has been shared that you would consider, kind of on the line?
Oh yeah, there's positive is tons and tons and tons and tons and tons. Usually when we feel good about it as somebody who creates property, and somebody's got their mic is echoing as far as I can hear it. What I have found in terms of when we feel positive about seeing stuff shared, there's a degree of attribution is when folks feel positive about that. They're excited to share it, and they're excited to see it shared. They're also excited to see that it's attributed and what other people are doing with it. Mm-hmm. So, I heard this thing and it is taking off, and look what they did with it, which is way cool. So that's frequently what but I'd like you guys to jump in as well, because you have experience with that as well. When it feels not so great is a range of things, from when we see language that is clearly our language, to put it, there's no other way of really saying it, but language that we've created that is so clearly identifiable that if you were to plug that language into Google, our stuff would pop up, being used by others directly without any kind of attribution. That frequently will feel uncomfortable, and
or with attribution to themselves.
There's a range. So it is saying it in a blog post. Susie Smith says it, and if your name is Susie Smith, I don't mean that you did this. But somebody somebody writes a blog post, puts a whole lot of stuff that's ours in that blog post, doesn't attribute it, and gets lots and lots of comments about how great Susie is. That's one, all the way to, we're not even going to go into what is direct plagiarism, and I've actually experienced that, where somebody has published an article in a journal under their name, which was my article, where we actually had to. I'm not. That is so egregious and so ridiculous and so rare that I don't think that that's even part of our conversation today. Mm-hmm. Okay. So I think that one of the questions that I might be curious for others, both the folks who are watching and the people in this room, is when does it feel good for you in terms of watching the information be shared, and when does it not feel so good? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Does that answer your question though, Gail?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Thank you.
And in the spirit of what other people are thinking, I want to mention that Jane Garson, Susan Detweiler, and Lisa Humanek checked in as if they're watching the meeting. Jane said that she loves the idea of adding organizational awesomes to the board agendas. So thank you for that, Jane. And Lisa said that she's excited to hear more on the discussion of this particular topic today. Mm-hmm. So thank you for checking in, and other folks, if you'd like to check in, that would be wonderful as well.
And we want to acknowledge the return of our prodigal son, our prodigal professor, Sydney. It's so great to have you back. Welcome.
So good to be here. Good to see you all. Glad to be here.
Yay.
I feel like I've been. I do feel like I've been lost for a while, so I'm glad to be back.
We're so glad you're here, and we want to hear about the outcome of your course. But perhaps today you could start with your awesome. What's been awesome?
Mm-hmm. Well, what's awesome right now is we are in yet another new office. This one will probably be in for a while. If you remember, this time last year we changed as well, but we're in a co-working space, so it's new to be in a shared office environment. Still in the same town, but fantastic. We're really enjoying it. Being able to choose whatever desk you want to use for today, and having the opportunity to work alongside other entrepreneurs and small businesses and others. So it's an exciting new development. And I don't have to go home for meetings.
I need to say that I saw you post about that. I don't remember where I saw you post.
Sure.
But the thought that a community foundation is in a co-working space, talk about ripping the walls down between a foundation and the organizations that the community. I'm really excited to hear how this goes for you.
Well, I mean, it's interesting because I was involved with co-working to some degree 6 years ago in Columbus, and had been looking for a co-working space the last time we were looking for an office, and there wasn't one really close by. So it just so happens that the day that I started looking for office space this time around, there was an ad in the local paper talking about this new co-working space that's opening in January. So it worked out perfectly. Honestly, I think the model in general would be fantastic for, even nonprofit specific. The opportunity to have certainly those that are smaller and simply need a space to work and meeting space. It would work well. I think the challenge is that it's we decided day one to be paperless 5 years ago. So when we opened the doors, that's where we were. So that it, literally the move, so to speak, took less than a week, because it was just a matter of moving from one location to another location and packing up a few things. But
wow. Yeah, paperless. Oh my gosh. As we're all surrounded by it right now.
That's normally the reaction when I say that. There's either those that are cheering it up and others that just start to break out into sweat. Can't imagine it, right?
Maybe I'm too old. I don't know. Anywho, folks. So we've launched ourselves into this conversation about intellectual property with a great question, which is when does it, as maybe a litmus test, when does it feel good, and when is it something that we need to be paying closer attention to because it's just telling us something's wrong? As you think about this organization, so we have a tendency in our conversations to work at two levels. One of them is that greater, broader sector level, and another is at the, so what does this mean for creating the future? So today I'm hoping that we'll be able to focus specifically on creating the future because we've had this conversation on several occasions. So what is it that's feeling good and not so good for you?
So as Hildy was talking and I was listening to sort of the different scenarios, the thing that really jumped out at me was ego. And both the personal ego and the perceived ego from the other side. Because the thing that I really, when you're asking that question, like how do I feel when I see my words out there? And I take great pride in my words. I have lots of ego wrapped up into them. I love the ideas. But I'm very conscious when I present them to try to present them that while I have much pride in them, they are not me. They are words that are about something else. And I think, so I'll speak from a personal standpoint, perhaps that gives me a little unjustified latitude in when I bring other ideas in, because I'm not I'm not trying to use the ideas to bolster myself. I'm just trying to use the ideas to bolster an idea, to bolster a thought. And so what really struck with me, Hildy, when you were talking, was when those words get used, and I perceive them to be used in a way that that person is trying to own them or bolster their ego by using them. That's when it feels uncomfortable. If it's just my idea and I feel like they're just putting it out there because it's a strong idea, it's okay. I kind of think I was thinking about Facebook. Like Facebook, it's fine for you to hit the link and cite someone else and show their thoughts. It's not quite as okay if it's my status that I'm claiming that. So, and I'm not quite sure what that means for the in terms of how you cite and credit and attribute ideas, because sometimes it's difficult. We don't know. We can't differentiate. But there's something about intent and how, and so I want to be very careful because it's both the intent that someone explicitly has and the intent that we project on them when we see our words.
Which comes from how we feel about it. Yeah.
Others? Other thoughts?
Shall I have a go?
Yep.
Don't know. You guys don't know if you listen to music much. It's my favourite hobby. And the music industry has changed fundamentally over the last 30 years, certainly over the last 10 years, because of the digital revolution. So if you're one of these large bands now like U2 or the Rolling Stones, everything's easy, isn't it? Because you had 30 years of building a career and so on, and everybody knows you. But if you're an artist now, there are no record company advances or anything like that. And if you want to get your music out there, you've got to think completely differently. And you've also got to think completely differently about intellectual property. So for what it happens, I just happen to like a guitarist called Matt Stevens, and I've just put his link up there on the side. When I started following Matt Stevens a few years ago, his story was that I think he was in some sort of accident and he broke his leg, and he got interested in social media at the time, and he sort of realised that his biggest problem is not getting people to pay for his music, the equivalent of engaging with us and helping us become sustainable. His biggest problem is people have never heard of him. People don't know about what he does. So he started using social media a lot, and he gives a lot of his music away. But he's no different to you and I. He has to earn a living and all that sort of stuff. So he's one of quite a few musicians I know that use something called Bandcamp. There's an equivalent service called SoundCloud that you might have come across. Now, look at the Rolling Stones or whoever. They're not using SoundCloud. They're charging for everything that they can. But the model that these people are adopting is give it away, because you've got to give it away so that you can get noticed. People understand who you are because you're giving it away, and then they're starting doing things like pay what you think it's worth and so on. But their biggest sort of thing is, you've got to get noticed. People out there have got to be able to taste it, what you do. And it strikes me it's a similar sort of thing for us with IP. Stop worrying about whether or not someone's paying for it or anything like that. Give it away. And then if you look at the wider record industry model, people will sort of think, okay, well, actually, there's value in what you do, and I'd like to know a bit more about what you do. So what's our equivalent of touring? What's our equivalent of selling T-shirts? Because no one's making money from music anymore, but they are making money from T-shirts and all that sort of stuff. So I keep coming back to the music industry as a model of non-profits have got to think about how we move forward. And then my final sort of thing, I've no idea who originally came up with this quote, but it's one that sticks with me, and it's it's amazing how much success you can have when you don't care about who gets the credit.
One of the interesting things about that quote is that it is the most misattributed quote that I've ever seen. If you think about the irony in that.
Just quick aside on music and giving it away, Carl. There's a composer named Kevin MacLeod who has a wide range of music that he creates and performs, from jazz to, I mean, he basically can imitate any style. And he literally gives these away online to be used for podcasts, videos, whatever. Now, he has a business where, I mean, his livelihood comes from the fact that he's a composer and a musician. But there's a gigantic library online where you can find virtually any kind of music that he even categorizes as music for scary movies, music for happy times, music for whatever, and it's pretty amazing stuff. So sort of similar to what you were describing, Carl, I think that there is much of that is going on.
Our reason for being is to make a way of thinking ubiquitous. So the thought that our that the most important thing that we can see is that these ways of thinking are everywhere. That requires, I mean, sharing is what we are about, and so the question becomes, though, that there's nobody who is creating that music that's saying, I would like everybody to have this music and to say that it's theirs. So that I get to listen to Matt Stevens and say, hey, did you hear my song?
Right.
And that's sort of where that line comes in. It's when we talk about, quote, protecting
Reggie, you
intellectual
just put up.
property. I'm sorry, what, was that something, Gail? Did I miss something? Are we down? Did I
think she froze.
Yeah, she froze.
She froze. Okay. She'll be back.
Here I am. Sorry.
The thing that is becoming clear to me is that when we talk about intellectual property, we talk about it as if it is a thing. And what it is the thoughts of the human and how that human feels about it. And that's where I'm so appreciative of Justin's thinking about, because, you know, when it's how we feel about it, it is ego. It's whose is this, and how do we? So how, you know, what does it take? Because we know that the high potential is that we share it, that everybody's that this becomes ubiquitous. Okay, where's the line? How does?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So let me just hone in then on the question that we are actually considering at this moment, because we've kind of established that there are issues related to this topic, and some of them are very personal, some of them are about merchandising or about influencing or whatever. So we know that there are things we want to pay attention to, and if we're paying attention to them to the extent that we all feel really positive, what is it that happens? What is it that's coming out of it? What's the purpose or the outcome that we're working towards?
Can I just jump in here for a second?
Please.
This is all a great discussion. I think I'd like to provide maybe a different perspective coming from the startup, even the academic space, and I might be biased because I graduated from the University of Waterloo, but I think the University of Waterloo has one of the best IP policies out there, where it simply states whatever you create at the university is yours. I mean, there are some stipulations, and they go into whether it's, you know, part of a coursework or if it's sponsored. So depending on where the funding comes from, but for the most part, whatever you create in school at the University of Waterloo belongs to you. And so what has happened in the past 10, 15 years, more so even in the past 5 years, is this thriving ecosystem of startups that have come out of the University of Waterloo, where own the IP to the products or the companies that come out of it. What the university has been able to do is spin that off into entrepreneurship programs and entrepreneurship infrastructure, whether it's co-working spaces that you mentioned, Sydney, or it's venture funding at the early stage, funding that enables students to start a company instead of going off to work for a company for the co-op term, or if it's like longer term, like much larger Series A, Series B investment. And the university has been able to build on that by enabling them to attract more students that have an entrepreneurial bent to them to come to the University of Waterloo, because whatever you create, you own. And I think one of the questions that stood out to me in one of the earlier board, in the board package that was sent out, what information, I can't remember what the wording was, but something around the programs for the graduates, the Creating the Future program. It's like that might be something to consider, where the IP belongs to the creators themselves, but then Creating the Future is able to leverage that in some way, shape, or form, like the University of Waterloo has done. And I shared the link here in the chat, but I'll also share it on Twitter so more people can just read through it if they want. But that's like a good example to work off of if you want an example of like what IP has been able to do within that community.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful.
In a real basic way, you think about, and Hildy touched upon this when we started, that as a society, we have built upon the work of the ones that preceded us. But as a species, we do the exact same thing. We learn by imitating what others do. Can you imagine applying IP rules to your child? Oh, I'm sorry, I learned to talk, so you have to pay me if you're going to learn to talk, or you're going to learn to walk. And I know it sounds ridiculous, but really, when you think about it at its very, very most elemental form, that is what we are as human beings. Is we are master imitators and learners from what others do. And we have, as Hildy was saying, applied very, very recent walls around that to monetize that. And I think it provides, you know, I use the example of a child, that it seems ridiculous, but I think also as a society, it has some of the same connotations and some of the same results that you can imagine by doing that.
I wanted to bring in a couple things out of the Twitter stream. Susan Detweiler said, "Is gratitude a part of this? If we are grateful for someone else's thoughts, we attribute those thoughts. Modeling appreciation for what others have said encourages attribution." And so that whole piece of appreciation and gratitude, I think, is important. I'm adding that into, as Renji had noted, past conversations about this that you had linked to in some of the material scale, where attribution is the thing that just keeps coming up. And it's really interesting because if you look at Creative Commons has levels of attribution. I own this, you can't touch it, all the way to I don't care who uses it, but the things that are in between there all have to do with how you're attributed. And the conversations that we've had in the past have been about exactly what you said, Renji, which is that if the point of what we're doing, that people will share their stuff, which is what the university wants. They want you to develop stuff inside there. If the whole purpose is that our fellows are developing and making richer the stuff that we're thinking and building upon that, and people out in the world are building upon that, the precondition for that over and over and over again in past conversations has been attribution. And I think that the place, Justin, where ego feels badly, and I love this, is someone trying to own my words to bolster their ego, is that ego grapple between what we're feeling. You know, generally when humans act badly, it's because we feel threatened in some way. So if my ego is feeling threatened that somebody is using my words, you don't want to know how my blood boiled when I saw somebody had written my article. I mean, it had written their name on my article and published it in a journal. You know, there's a level of that went beyond ego. That's like your face turns purple and your head explodes. I don't think we're talking about that. I think what we're talking about is the balance. Maybe this will just be an ongoing conversation. Maybe this doesn't get to any conclusion. The balance between the fact that we are so much about creating an environment for sharing, and maybe the question that we have been grappling with and not wanting to say is, what do we do when somebody uses our words and doesn't attribute them?
So I really like
our values there.
Yeah. What I really liked about what Renji shared from the University of Waterloo was right up front, I did a quick read, of framing what we're talking about. That this concept of intellectual property is a construct that's primarily focused around commoditizing things. And to sort of go esoteric, I was going, I think, the same way that Dimitri was going, which was, imagine if you were a Native American and someone said, I'm making this property that I can own, this land. And they look at that and they just go, this is not something to be owned. This is the collective. This is the thing that we all thrive on, the thing that we all flourish on. And so I think a lot of it has much more to do with the lens we put on it, which defines what we consider to be property/ownership. And I think what you're getting at, Hildy, is perhaps we need to come at this, again, from the perspective of what is it that we want the community to be doing with information? Yeah. Waterloo says this is, the intellectual pursuit is the sharing of ideas. I mean, that's what I read out of it. And that's what the mission of the university is. So that's what their policy reflects. And, they sort of have a workaround to say, well, you can kind of own it in this way. But, what does intellectual property really exist if you come at it from a different lens?
I think it's really important for us to explore the answer to that question further in order for us to move in the direction of something that is, I don't agree, Hildy, that this is something that we could talk about forever. I think we really do, need to get to a sense of what it is we do at the operational level in this organization about the kinds of gifts that people bring in thought and in program and ideas, etc. So I think it's really valuable to answer the question, what do we want the community to do with these ideas? And then a secondary question will be yours, which is, and then what would we do if someone doesn't attribute? But first and foremost is, what do we envision people doing with the ideas that come forward, that people share in such generosity?
Gail, to answer that, I actually want to go back to Hildy's moment where there's this egregious plagiarism. Because I think it actually is useful to think about this extreme example just for a second, because ultimately with something that crazy, that blatant, I don't think you can actually stop that. But I think it's instructive as we think about what we might do in response to it. So if I were to go on to, let's say, SoundCloud, I post this Justin Bieber song and go, hey, check out the song I just recorded. It's really great. Someone would come up and go, man, that's not you, that's Justin Bieber. And I think that's the response that we want in this case, because you can never go around doing this like bopping thing, trying to find every time that there's some plagiarism, bop it out. But rather, you want the community knowing, no, actually, that's what Hildy wrote. And I think if we get to that stage where it becomes either Hildy or Creating the Future in this case, hey, that's Creating the Future's writing, that's actually a really good success marker, I think, that things have been spread that well. And I think that's only possible if it really is spread all throughout, so that it's not locked up within any silos, but that actually forced us towards a general principle, which is this idea of sharing as much as possible and then finding smart ways to attribute it.
Beautiful.
Alex, I'm thinking about the Creative Commons world and how when you look at the different licenses that were established and why they were established, and how, when I think about it, it's because this free-to-the-world concept still has to live within the copyright world, and I'm using these as sort of placeholder words. So you have to come up with a construct that makes sense with that, so that you can have a Creative Commons method of distribution that lives alongside to the siloed world, so that there is an an integration, really, with society as it exists today. I mean, ideally, I'd like to see the Justin world of what? You know, the land is what nurtures us all and owned by everybody, but that's not what exists right now. So I'm just, this is more of a comment than a statement, that the rules that have been established are meant to deal with that. And I know, having read some of the early debates that went on in the GNU licensing and the other types of, in the software world, was because they were dealing with copyright and patent in the commercial world. And how do you address the fact that you want to have something that is not attributed as Justin Bieber's song, as your song? How do you deal with that? So I just want to make sure that we think about this not only in a conceptual way, but also in a real world. This is what exists right now. How do we address it in a way that's consistent with that?
So I'm going to pull a Hildy. What's the worst that could happen if people stole all our ideas?
People wouldn't want to share them. The place that's coming for me, Justin, is when I took myself out of it and started to picture the intellectual property, quote unquote, that you guys are creating as fellows, and that you're sharing, and the classes that you're creating. And when I took myself out of it, it was way easier for me to look at this realistically. And so for me, the worst that could happen if all of the work of all of our fellows is being used without attribution by others and or attributed to their own thinking is A, you know, my feeling of protection over you guys, and B, that why would anybody want to share their thinking if the feeling is that it would be stolen, quote unquote.
Wow. You know what, guys? I have to say, I don't know if you're noticing this, but we have started this conversation from such a negative place. That's so not like us. I feel like we're heading down a rabbit hole of negativity that gives us nothing to work with. So
then let's raise it up. What does it make possible? What does it make possible if this issue is resolved? If this issue is resolved, what does it make possible, and for whom? We
have actually named that several times. We've talked about how we want to increase attribution, and I think we really should answer the question: what do we want the community to do with these ideas? Because there's a ton of possibility right there.
So we want the community to improve them.
Exactly.
If you look at all the evidence that's about innovation, okay, there are very, very few light bulb moments or eureka moments. Most innovation is incremental.
Yeah.
And we want the crowd to help us innovate incrementally. We want the crowd to help us improve our ideas, to test them. We've said that creating the future is a living laboratory. Well, those ideas all need to be tested in the laboratory out there that is the world. We want to shift from having hypotheses of change to theories of change. So that's what the potential is for doing this, and as you say, I mean, there's the recognition as well. Yeah. So I think we can be really optimistic about this, actually.
Wow.
I just want to mention that Susan Detweiler has had several comments here on this, and I want to mention those. Modeling appreciation for what others have said encourages attribution. Attribution allows the recipient to seek out the originator for more if it resonates for them. In Talmud, all discussions reference and give attribution to originators of thought, even as the written conversation continues. And attribution allows the recipient to seek out the originator for more. Okay, she already said that's a retweet. So I think there's some resonating there with the power of attribution, along what you were just saying, Carl. that we want it to build, and I think the attribution is we want the ideas to build and to expand, and I think attribution is probably one of the tools that makes that happen.
Mm-hmm.
What we want the community to do with those ideas, I love what you came up with, Carl. I love what you do. Use, explore, share, move them out into the world.
Dialogue about what their experience was. Come back into a space with us so that we can talk about what happened and what they saw, what they learned, what they did, what it makes possible, what meaning it comes out of it. What I also like about that is that it implies for us that you can almost start to think about what kind of conversation you would have with somebody who is a generator of ideas when they come into our space. This is the kind of thing you can expect to happen with your idea once you bring it here.
Mm-hmm.
I can't just find it now, but Jane Garthson just said something on Twitter about how if people don't attribute our ideas and they make it into the general sort of language out there or knowledge, that they become the norm. That just sort of made me think about that quote, and again I can't remember who to attribute this, about how all truth goes through 3 stages. At first it's ridiculed, sort of then it's rejected, and then it's accepted as the norm. Well, it may well be the case that some of the things that we talk about are not accepted as the right way to do things. So sharing this and not worrying about the attribution, if these things just then get accepted, that the potential of that is that it helps us norm our ideas.
Mm.
Yeah, the norming of the ideas is, I think, so vital, because I think we are engaged in a muddling process. I mean, when we're talking about the goals that we have as an organization, the theories that we pull forward, the thought that we can apply to this, I think to Carl's point, it's only as good as our ability to try it out. And it's only as good as our ability to communicate it to others. And I know from a fellow's standpoint that I can speak from, turning the conceptual ideas into something that can be communicated, normed, executed, is really challenging and is incredibly variable. I mean, what I say in this space is so different than what I need to say, like, to my daughters about what I do, to my wife about what I do, and so the space to be able to allow the ideas to ferment, to be more normed, to be paired, to be expanded. I mean, all of those, the exploration of the ideas, without that space, we don't get to our big goal of changing community. I see that as a prerequisite. If the ideas actually cannot be shared, articulated, challenged, reframed, with intentionality and with purpose, but if they can't be, we run the risk of undoing so much of what our core and our values. Okay? Mm-hmm. I need to stop because I feel like I'm...
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, assuming that what we're talking about is written and or published content, right? And I'm just in that space. My question is, how do we even know when that happens? When something that has been written by one of the fellows or somehow connected to CTF has been republished or written without attribution? Like, how do we know that? I know in the university space what happens, because there are systems to run written papers through to see, oh yeah, well, it looks a lot like this other document. But how would we know is one question. And then I think the other part of it is that I'm struggling with is this notion of ideas versus written content. ideas until they're written and published, is that different than when it is? And because I do believe, and I think we've talked about this, again, this notion of being the laboratory, and that sharing is essential. But I see that as different than the whole idea of something that is written that needs attribution or should have attribution.
Mm-hmm. Hildy, can you answer the first question first?
Which is, how do we know?
Yeah.
Sometimes we just come across it. Sometimes there are actually services. I mean, the easiest way is to take phrases that are absolutely, quote, yours, and type them into Google and see what comes up. There are web services that's how I found out about the plagiarism years ago. Mm-hmm. Is I typed it into a web service and went, oh my gosh. So there are ways of finding out for direct plagiarism, but I think that in some cases you're just encountering it.
Okay.
And the second question about well, anyway, leave it open and see who wants to respond.
Could you repeat the question, Gail? The second question? Because I think there is a difference between ideas and, because that was what I had circled, is that there's a difference between ideas and written content.
Yeah. Yep. And we have to make the assumption that in addition to you, Hildy, there will be other people whose work would be under the banner of creating the future. And a third down the road, maybe by the end of this conversation today, we want to be thinking about what responsibility we have as an organization to that kind of work. What steps would we need to have in place in order to honor the published work of those who gift it to the organization.
Right, and that's going to be more and more of an issue, because over the next year, as we're growing programming, it is going to be growing programming that I'm not going to be creating at all. And very much I'm appreciating how protective Alexandra was of my work in the early days, is how I am feeling about the work of everybody else that is starting to create it now.
So
can we explore that a little bit then?
The words that I keep writing down, Gail, and is how do we bring out the best in the people that are creating the content and the people that we want to use the content.
So I'm trying to reply to that question with what I was coming up with, Hildy. I think the expectations we have of what will happen with the content that people bring is vitally important. Setting it up to say, when you contribute to this forum, you can expect, and Gail said this is what you can expect to happen with your ideas, to how we will try and honor and protect the ideas to the degree that we can. But I think part of it is for us to decide, and I think this is more about the best of the community, which I know is important for the individual, but if the best of the community, when we come from that standpoint of how best do ideas get proliferated, normed, tested, distributed, shared, so that, going back to what Alex said, people just know this is the way to be. Setting up our expectation of how you facilitate that kind of flow of ideas. And then I think when we invite people, that expectation is clear, and then we need to tie into them, and this may be paternalistic, but sort of how do we allow people the ability to move into that space? That potential for them to move into a space where their ideas can flourish in that way and in that forum. That's where I look at it. I know it's deeply embedded in my values of just, once an idea is out there, it's unlocked. It's, Pandora's out. And even though there's a lot of my own ego wrapped up into it, I mean, that's what I'm always doing. I already know what I know. That's not what I really care about. Even though I like to talk about what I know.
There's a creative tension here between these ideas, between these concepts, and that's where good stuff happens. Is you know, if it goes way far in one direction or another, it doesn't generate new thinking, and I think we're at that point in the process of figuring this out, and how it relates to the mission of creating the future, have that tension between honoring and nurturing and supporting folks to provide their thinking and their ideas, and wanting it to be ubiquitous, wanting everyone to be using these and thinking this way and whatever. So
following on.
I'm sorry, Carl.
Sorry. So following on from your thinking about how do people sort of get the attribution or the recognition, as someone who writes blog posts and so on every now and then, there's nothing makes you feel better than when you go to your blog post and you see that 50 people have read something that you wrote, yeah, and then, I mean, if they've said that they like it as well, I mean, we can't do that with my organisation's website, but that's a great feeling to know that someone not only is reading what you do, but it's liking what you do. And then in terms of what you want the community to do with it, the other thing that sort of occurs to me about that innovation stuff is that we've got an organisation called Nesta that's about innovation and good ideas, and they will sort of argue that, you know, all the time people have good ideas all the time, but the difference between good ideas and innovation is application. So what you actually want your users to do is apply your ideas in different settings and see if they work. So that it strikes me that the people with the good ideas, if someone could then take them and apply them and then make a difference, that would be amazing, I suspect, for most people who have ideas.
Gail, something just popped for me. And it comes to how do we bring out the best in creators of content, users of content, and I'm really sorry for my lack of finding a better language for it right now. But for lack of better language, abusers of content. People who, whether it is by lack of attribution or I'm not even going to go by intentional. I'm not going to go by I put my name on somebody else's stuff, but by lack of attribution, because there's a piece there. There's a piece there. They're not. They're doing what we want them to do. They're loving it. They're excited about it. They're whether intentionally or not, claiming it as their own thinking because there's something that's deeply resonating there, and that's all the things that we said that we want people to do with these ideas, is improve them and test them and share them. And the thing that's occurring to me in the how do we bring out the best in creators and users and abusers, and give me another word for that, free riders, if you want to be nice. Thank you. Yeah. Is you connect them, and so here's something that happened to me a couple of weeks ago. I saw language in a blog post that was so clearly our language, and you could type our language into Google and find out that this is clearly ours. And of course, the first thing I did was like get pissed off. And because it was somebody's blog that they were using it, there was no attribution. The next thing I did, though, was I reached out to that person and said, "Wow, it's clear that we're thinking along the same lines." And there's something in there about connecting, that is who we are, and so in In the what do we do when there's lack of attribution place, I'm hearing so much of what we've been talking about of assuming the intent of others. What we're seeing is a behavior. We're assuming all kinds of intent because we're pissed, and because we're hurt, and because our ego is bruised, and because we want to protect all of the people that are now writing for us and creating for us. And if we take ourselves out of that, if we take the storyline out of that, and we come back up to, okay, what do we actually know? We know that this person is thinking along the lines that we are. That this is a kindred spirit.
Yep.
Can our, if what we come to is a policy in these cases, if one of the conditions for success, for dialogue, for improving these ideas, for testing, for proliferating them, if one of the conditions for success, yes, is attribution, but another one is connection, maybe that becomes part of what the policy is. Maybe we're focused so much on feeling protective of people.
Exactly.
Attribution place, that we're not feeling protective of the person who really is excited about the thing that we're doing.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It's an unfinished thought, but there's something there that's connecting really deeply for me.
Well, it reminds me of what I wrote in the chat, which is, so you start to think about what's going on for people who are who are borrowing without attributing, and sometimes that's a very red behavior, right? It's the I just need to whatever. I need a quick thing. I need this. I need that, without ever really thinking about the impact on somebody else. Mm-hmm. And when we shift our focus to that compassionate understanding of what it is that they're about, as soon as you use the words red, tips, tricks, oh, okay, now I can see that, and it gives us the space for that engagement that goes beyond, stop it. To quote Anne McKay, stop it. But to asking them questions. Walk me through what this was about for you. Walk me through so that I can understand where you've been coming from and what it is about this work of ours that has made it such of interest that you would want to replicate it. Yeah. I would imagine that's where lots of people found us in the first place. I suspect that's where I found Creating the Future, because I was desperately looking for a model that had some relevance to the work that I had previously been doing, but related to leadership and governance. So I was probably read like crazy.
The thing that is popping for me is and making me smile is that I started when you asked me about to give some context. I started by saying that it's never about the thing; it's always about the people, and that we focused so much on how the people are feeling who created and feel wronged. Yeah. That there's other people here, and it being about the other people who are excited about what we're doing, are resonating to whatever degree, knowingly or unknowingly, borrowing language that resonates with them. Again, if it's not about the thing and it's about the people, then it's about connecting the people.
Yeah, I come to, there's only so much language in the world. So if someone has a similar idea, short of the plagiarism, they're going to stumble across the same way of communicating, the same core. And, we have just found one way of talking about this. And I think one of the things that is quite apparent, you look at Elizabeth Shore, you look at others out there who, you read their stuff and you're like, wow, okay, I get that. That's the same thing I'm talking about. I think coming to that is really, really important, is to say there are only so many ways to say things. There's, again, the language stuff. And I think this whole idea of let's connect to what's going on, what people are trying to achieve with the work that they are doing. Whether that work is, plagiarizing, drawing from, but I think what you were saying, Gail, and Hildy, I know you shared with me personally the difference. It's a classic: pick up the phone and talk to the person, because fundamentally, if you're both trying to say it, you both believe the same thing, and you both want to advance that. And so that's the space that I think we need to really, really open up. And Alex, I have to call on you because you've been so quiet, because I know in your space of being generative, of bringing out people's ideas and creating spaces for that. How are you reflecting on this conversation?
Yeah, thanks, Justin. I mean, I've been trying to kind of encapsulate thoughts, but I mean, I think really, for me, it comes down to this shift going from protecting intellectual property to engaging through intellectual property. So instead of defending, we find a way to reach out. I mean, I, of course, always try to think around like the practical thing, but to me, then it seems like there's a couple practical things we could put in place. The first, of course, is that maybe within Creating the Future, we have our own sort of levels of attribution. So, Hildy, to your point of wanting to protect people, maybe some people want to be protected, maybe other people don't. So why do people write on, Medium, for instance, where you're basically giving your content away to Ev Williams? Well, because it gives a microphone, gives a platform. So maybe some people, like if I were to write for Creating the Future, I probably wouldn't care that much. I'd say, hey, it's worth it because you guys are this lighthouse. You guys will get the word out there. Whatever happens, happens. Other people, maybe they'll say, no, I want you to protect it. So what does protecting then means? Well, I think it means engaging. So maybe you come up with a few different actions that you take depending on the level of the intellectual property engagement, right? So on one level, it's very theoretical words that are kind of similar to something that you wrote, in which case, great. Then you write a comment in the blog post and you go, hey, we love these things too. Check out this blog post where we talked about it. To maybe, on the further end where it's closer to plagiarism, where then maybe you have some other action that you take where you make it sort of clear, hey, keep this up, but it'd be great if you would put in, thoughts inspired by, and then say this post, whatever. But for me, I think if we make that shift, then that allows us to then kind of put some policies around how we actually engage, and I think ways to engage in across the board, a positive way.
Alex, could I challenge you on your second group? It is for the purposes of debate. How's about that second group who want their intellectual property protected? The response is, well, actually, protecting your intellectual property is all about scarcity mindset, and this organization is about abundance. So if you want to create a world where there is scarcity and they can't have your ideas, could you go and publish that somewhere else, please?
Wow.
Thank you for bringing that value, Carl.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I think that's what was unsettling. If we're talking about abundance, how can we constrain ideas? Yeah.
We also, in the theory of change and the other work that we do, talk about affecting the future by creating conditions that bring about what we're looking at accomplishing. And when you look at the world, conditions come into play that allow ideas to grow whether you do it or not. So it's sort of the phenomena how throughout history, different people in different places, different times, that have no connection with each other come up with the same idea, come up with the same concept, come up with, or similar enough that you would swear that they were in conversation with each other. What they're in conversation with are the conditions that bring that about. And a lot of that has to do with what came before. As long as those conditions include a free spread of ideas and thoughts and concepts, people will independently come up with very, very similar things.
I want to go ahead. I'm sorry.
That's beautiful, Dimitri. That's beautiful.
Well, I was just thinking of Darwin's parallel evolution, where you get cats that look like dogs and dogs that look like cats, because the conditions, the core was different, but the conditions created an outcome that's very, very analogous. And I think about, because I'm thinking about this attribution and gratitude, which I think are absolutely, I mean, I think these values, abundance, attribution, and gratitude are key. But I was just thinking about Carl when he said, I'm not sure who said this. And what's the barrier we put in front of people when we set up the expectation of you can't say it unless you know exactly where it came from? That's huge. I mean, think about all the things Carl wouldn't be able to say.
It'd be crickets.
I think that's, I mean, that touches on something, which is to be able to say, Carl is good enough to say, I know this comes from somewhere else, but it moves me to share this. And we have to have some space in there for people to be able to know that even if I don't know where it comes from, or even if I don't know exactly, because I'm influenced by so many people, I must plagiarize all the time. People look at stuff that I write, and all I can say is, this comes from my experience and exposure to the world, and I honor everybody who's contributed to the ability for me to be able to think. But thinking about, I think Alex was getting at this too, the barriers that the concept of intellectual property put around what we're trying to do is also something that's in this dialogue for to be thinking about.
I want to share what Susan added, because there's a word that I've been sort of making a list out of some of the things that you mentioned, Justin. And Susan said what's missing when people don't attribute is the conversation doesn't continue. And you mentioned abundance, attribution, which in my mind is honoring. So abundance, honoring, gratitude, conversation, and invitation are two words that are coming up for me. And as you were sort of going to policy place, Alex, I was also at the same time scribbling down policy. That when we feel that our language or content is being used without attribution, our first response will be to reach out and connect with that person to invite conversation.
I want to ask another little piece of this conversation or consideration, and that is when I can't remember who was bringing this forward, but it made me think about livelihoods. And perhaps it was the idea that we would say to somebody, well, if it's something you don't see contributing with generosity, then maybe there's another location for you. I wonder if there's another piece of that to think about, though, and that is that sometimes we're talking about the work that people do that they want to do under the helm of creating the future, with the expectation or the hope that it will increase their revenue or generate revenue for them. So the question then becomes, what does it take for there to be generosity and an income, as opposed to it being one or the other? And can we think our way down that pathway as well?
Are they necessarily at odds?
No, I'm wondering what it would take for us, for both to be happening, and for us to have the mindset that in some cases that might be what we're looking for, or that might be what somebody else is looking for, and it could have a home.
We charge for many of our classes. There's a lot of stuff that we write and we give away, but we charge for many of our classes.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so
I'm constantly told, Gail, that the consultants that we work with, what they crave all the time is to be in front of an audience, the opportunity to talk to people about their ideas, because you can show people that you have good ideas and you can help them think through their challenges. I think people will then quite often want some paid-for support to help them think about how your ideas apply to their context specifically.
Yep.
Yeah, I think about that from, just to go off that as the person that does that, my strength is not my ideas, my strength is my ability to get you engaged in my ideas. Mm-hmm. Is to get you conversing with the ideas. And I think that goes back to, Hildy mentioned conversation, Alex mentioned conversation, that we create spaces to engage around this. And I will prosper because I can demonstrate that I'm a person that helps facilitate engagement with and conversation around these ideas. Mm-hmm. And I do that by showing my ability to speak about it, to talk about it, to write about it, and to actually sit down and work with someone. about it and do it. To the application point that Carl made. And so it's a different construct. It's not, I'm not monetizing everything. I'm doing everything to monetize. I don't know how to frame that differently, but
it's coming back. And I just want to acknowledge that Jonas Oberg is out there, and so I'm glad that you're out there, and I'm glad that you're engaged in the conversation. He said that it's really interesting to connect attribution to abundance versus scarcity, and I think that the assumption that there is no compensation. I mean, there's realms of different pieces of this. That yeah, people will be compensated for, but that doesn't mean that if you're compensated for it, okay, I bought Tom Sawyer, it doesn't mean I get to say it's mine.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a number of interesting models that help to sort of bridge this gap, especially in the open source software community. So if you look at something like Red Hat, which is Linux, so Linux given away for free, but then the value add is around specific support and training and so on. So same thing. So if we want people, basically no one would care about Linux unless they can check it out for free and go, okay, no, this actually works, it makes sense. It's a lot of spreading knowledge and inspiration. So similar to Creating the Future, no one will care about it unless they start to learn about it and get what's going on, and they go, okay, cool, I want to engage further. Either I want to, be a tutor and help teach these things, or I want to learn more. I want to learn, to that point, how it applies to my specific case. So there's a lot of value add you can build on top of it. But central to it is getting more people to be, use the case, users, or in our case, people that are, interested and engaged with our intellectual property, our ideas.
And in the case that you give us an example, Alex, when Red Hat just made a ton of money as a company. I mean, their success is massive, and two, the intellectual property that we're talking about is a totally shared piece of intellectual property owned by no one, that is continually improved and built upon by sort of the world at large, including Red Hat. Carl had an interesting little note that research is theft from the many, plagiarism is theft from the few. So.
and who said that? I don't know.
I thought Alex's point just then was actually quite interesting, and I wonder if closer to home, and I'm thinking aloud here at the minute, the Carver model of governance. Mm-hmm. Am I all right in thinking that the people behind that still make an awful lot of money every year going out doing consulting around it, but the ideas that they had around that model have pretty much been given away?
Mm-hmm. Or taken.
Mm-hmm.
But usually attributed.
Yeah.
Usually attributed. I mean, there's even if it's offhandedly saying, well, this is sort of like policy governance.
Yeah.
Oh God, yeah, we're a Carver board.
Right.
Yeah, that's the ultimate attribution.
Yeah, but following that sort of thinking through, I mean, look at Apple at the minute and how Apple are getting ripped off by Chinese companies sort of every day. It sort of almost adds to the mystique that Apple are fantastic, because why would you rip off something that's crap? You only rip off the stuff that's absolutely brilliant. So if people are ripping off your stuff, that's maybe that helps grow the market in a perverse way. Sorry, poor choice of language, but.
So as we're pulling all of these pieces together, for the sake of us knowing what this organization's approach will be and whether or not we have enough agreement for there to be something that looks like, sounds like policy, that we would hear about things that have been happening and say to ourselves, oh, that's what the board decided in January 2015 about this topic. Can we summarize what has been said so far? What agreement have we come to today about how Creating the Future will be working on intellectual property?
Could I just say one thing here, Gail, before you do your summary?
Mm-hmm.
I found this a really useful and interesting discussion. The power of this discussion for me would be to challenge the orthodoxy at the moment that is organisations should be trying to protect their intellectual property as a way of becoming sustainable. So if we are going to succeed in the way that I think we want to, we will be a laboratory to show that you can become sustainable by sharing, by opening up and moving from scarcity to abundance in terms of how you think about intellectual property, and moving towards, I can't remember the exact language that Hilda used, but about valuing people, recognising them. That is the way to survive in the 21st century. That intellectual property and protecting it is 20th century thinking.
That's
Beautiful.
Great.
Beautiful.
That's
Beautiful.
great.
Beautiful.
That's great.
And when I summarize for myself, I think of Ranji's point about the University of Waterloo, and I kind of envision Creating the Future as a campus where these things are happening, where there's thinking and trying and creating and testing.
Gail, also before answering the question, I want to go back to the Twitter stream for a second. And first of all, I want to comment to Susan, you're on fire. And I'm going to go and tell you a little bit about what she's been talking about, because it's very applicable. I'm going to go back a little bit, about 20 minutes ago. People are naturally cautious. We want to know what to expect if we offer ideas. Justin's right. Likely need to state expectations. So this was the thought as to what people expect. Applying ideas is what's important. But what's missing when abusers don't attribute is conversation doesn't continue. Attribution allows the recipient to seek out the originator for more if it resonates with them. Is attribution a constraint? She asks as a question. Go back to the idea that attribution allows the conversation to continue. Assume that attribution is when you can know who said it. You can also say, I don't know who said it. Thank you, Carl, but that's okay. And the key is to know that it's not original. And so thank you so much, Susan, for your input on this.
Well, and I'm also wanting to nod to Jonas, who said that attribution is also tightly coupled with a reputation economy, and I think that that's huge. I think that's huge.
What does that mean?
That you are only as good as your reputation. That you know, we're all sort of banking on each other, and in this open world where we all can find out about each other so easily. I can tell you the reputation of the person who plagiarized me, unfortunately for him, got really badly shalumped. And it was a very horrible thing actually for me to have to deal with, because I felt so badly about how badly his reputation got shalumped for something that he did. But you asked for you had something. Gail asked for language, and so I want.
Right, on the reputation economy, Gail, it's what eBay does. In eBay, you know, you will buy something from someone, or allow someone to buy something from you because you kind of know what their reputation is, and the reputation is generated by other people saying what their reputation is.
Right.
So we're sort of responsible for creating that reputation economy in the sense of eBay is a place to buy and sell, but there's many other examples of this. If I go to Amazon and I look at a product and 17 people say this product sucks, the reputation of that product in my mind has dropped so low, I'm not going to buy that product.
Yep.
So I am drawn to what Carl was saying about the 21st century. And sort of, you know, and I'm drawn to the Pollyanna principle. Each and every day we're creating the future. I want a future where intellect and ideas are not property. I I want a community where intellect and ideas are avenues to conversation and exploration that contribute to abundance in the community, that people are honored in their ability to explore and articulate ideas. That's what I want. So I want us to behave in that way. And I want us to create that reality for those who are in connection with us as an organization.
Okay, so I am combining and playing with language because that's what you asked for, Gail.
Mm-hmm.
When we feel that our language/content is being used without attribution, pardon me, our first response will be to reach out and connect with that person, to invite conversation in a spirit of abundance, honoring, gratitude, conversation, invitation, and exploration.
Yep.
And then if they steal our shit, we'll hurt them.
Apparently they hurt themselves, so we don't need to.
That's right.
And Siri, Dustin, that is what was so upsetting to me about what eventually happened to the person who plagiarized me.
Mm-hmm.
Is that he really hurt himself. It was horrible. Yeah, he got himself fired from a university position.
More than once.
Yeah. Yeah, and you're right. It does hurt himself. But does that come close? Does that language come
Would
close?
you repeat it?
When we feel that our language/content is being, I'm so sorry, is being used without attribution, our first response will be to reach out and connect with that person, to invite conversation in a spirit of abundance, honoring, attribution, gratitude, conversation, invitation, and exploration.
Wow.
It's good.
Mm-hmm.
That's certainly a high ground response to.
I still think we need something around our view of intellectual property. I think going to what Carl was saying, and I think also, I mean, what a lot of people have been saying in this conversation, but that expectation of we don't see it the same way that the rest of the world sees it. And this is how we see it. This is what it means to us. Because I think what you've crafted, Hildy, is how we will respond. But in some ways, there's still a little bit of, well, what are we responding to?
Well, could the preamble then be what your thoughts were, Justin? A future where intellect and ideas are not property, but avenues to exploration and creativity and change.
Doesn't have to be my language.
Well, but it's just good language.
The starting point for language for me is, why should somebody come to creating the future as a vehicle for their ideas? And they should come to us because we believe that sharing ideas is the best way to improve them. Sharing ideas is the best way to implement them.
Popping back in.
And the best way to share ideas is to make them open, free.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And our currency is attribution.
Mm.
Our currency is impact that people achieve by using our ideas.
Mm.
I'm feeling really bad that we missed that.
It's recorded though, thank God.
I know. all I heard was our currency is attribution. I was like, oh my God, this sounds so good.
Well,
the tablets of stone are on your way. I've just got to work out how to pay for the mailing cost, okay?
Okay.
I think there are profits to carry them where you need them to go.
How do you spell
True
that?
story.
Spell that Justin?
P-R-O-P-H-E-T.
Well, that's the whole thing. There are both.
Huh. There's profit and profit. All right, how are you feeling about what we have put together? Actually, you know what? Before we finish this, I think there's one other thing. We've talked about it in terms of what it means for us and our content. It would probably be worth it, and it doesn't necessarily have to happen now, perhaps offline, but to be thinking as well about what it means for us in terms of the content that is generated by others. How do we honor?
On behalf of Creating the Future, or as part of?
Partner organizations whose ideas we really love or feel really resonate. Not that we would ever plagiarize them, of course, that's not what I mean, but what is it that we are able to do in terms of honoring the work of partner organizations? And as I said, this doesn't have to be right now, but I do think there's an internal and an external view that we probably might want to think about.
Susan,
did that make sense?
It did, and I think it actually points at something that Susan raised on the Twitter feed, which is being clear of what we're talking about when we talk about intellectual property.
Yep.
So that we do attribute it to others as when necessary, and we are clear about what we're talking about. Even though we're talking about sort of shattering the idea of property around it, but what is this thing that we are talking about? Yeah.
Right.
Being specific, Justin, Susan was saying that is intellectual property ideas or writing or book or arts or patents? And I think that's probably a good point.
Mm-hmm. I was referring to standards of behavior regarding the works of others. Right. I just wondered if we needed to put that in writing ourselves somewhere.
At the beginning of the conversation, Hilda used a phrase that I absolutely love, which is "we stand on the shoulders of giants." So if I was writing this up, I would think about, rather than intellectual property, we recognize the intellectual foundation of the things that we say and do. So regardless of whether or not anyone lays claim, we should always be trying to identify that yes, I mean, other people have inevitably had similar ideas to the ones we're talking about.
Yeah, that's beautifully said. Okay. So, wow, this is certainly one of those conversations that it's so wonderful to know we have recorded, because there was a lot said. But as you think about how all of the discussion came together, what is sticking out for you as being the thing that you will take away, remember, want to see more action on, whatever?
Oh, I'm going to go first.
Okay.
My reflection is that when we react to the thing that is presented, we always act like crap. And that when we reach for what is possible and we create the conditions for that, then we reach for something that is way beyond anything that any of us would have imagined would have been the answer when the question was, how do I protect my stuff?
Yep.
And because the answer to that is never good, and it's always reactive. And this was such a beautiful, creative of what we want to see in the world, and it brought out the best in every single one of us, and I loved the words every single one of you said today, and I'm wishing Renji were still here, because that was wonderful having him here as well. So yeah, it just trust the process, trust the people in the room. It was just, to me, this great example of that.
I agree. My takeaway came, Gail, when you sort of switched the conversation from going down a possible negative track towards positive, and I mean that in and of itself was just so meta for me for why Creating the Future exists. So cool that we created maybe our own intellectual property ideas out of it, but just in and of itself, it was I think a beautiful Creating the Future moment.
Creating the Future moment. Wow, love it.
My last word is a joke. Why do anarchists only drink herbal tea?
Okay.
Because property is theft.
Oh, Carl. Oh, my God.
Ba-dum-bum.
You know, we should
give an attribution to that joke, Carl.
I was waiting for it.
You know, our board meetings are titled board meeting, but I think we should like have a phrase or a word that comes out of each one, and the phrase for this one is the question: why do anarchists drink?
Yeah. I want hashtag proper tea.
We'll give the minutes a title.
Exactly.
I would love to hear also reflections from Jonas and Susan and Jane and anybody else who has out there been participating and watching. What is standing out for you in the conversation?
Here's one that I think is worth acknowledging, and that is before he left, Renji noted that the relationship between TED, which are Ideas Worth Spreading, and their global TEDx program, enabling people in different communities to host their own independently organized events, as well as a fellows program. So he sees a number of parallels between us and the making our ideas ubiquitous and applied, and the TED program.
That's great.
There are two other things that were on the Twitter stream that I want to just touch on as well. One was Rebecca, and hello Rebecca, thank you for being with us today. That she loved, Gail, your idea that creating the future is seen as a campus, learning, exploring, sharing, testing, reporting, and building together. I emphasize the together part in creating a community and engaging and sharing. And then also, sort of the counterpoint to this conversation is something that Jane said, is try referencing policy governance without attribution. You'll get a quick angry note from the Carver folks. It's trademarked. And what that makes me think about, and as part of my reflection, is if our goal is to change the world, everybody needs to be out doing it. And it can't just be, you know, Bob XYZ with the seal of approval, because there's just not enough Bobs out there to do that. So I think that that's a real powerful takeaway for me is, you know, the fact that Gail, when you, as Alex said, meta-shifted the conversation, going for higher ground, and then Carl kind of did the same thing as well when he talked about the value of this as abundance. So all of those are very different from the reality that Jane referenced.
Yeah.
And that counterpoint to me is sort of my takeaway, a very powerful takeaway from this.
Thank you. Sydney, Justin?
For me, I think the one, I had to jot it down before I actually forgot what I was thinking, but you know, I agree that in this particular, during this meeting, things shifted when we started spending more time and energy toward what we were for than what we were against, and that's my lesson for today is just that, to spend more energy and time discussing, articulating what you're for than what you're against. We are for an open laboratory experience. We are for advancing attribution.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, that really, I think hits it for me, Sydney. I think the real takeaway for me, well, there are two. One is just, again, how we get caught in definitions, that we allow it to be defined by intellectual property. And I think Renji sort of opened that whole door up when suddenly you separate those two and think about intellect and property, and which of those matters more. And I think for us, the intellect, and if we disassociate it from the concept of property, how freeing that is for what we want to see happen. I'm also, as we were reflecting, and as Sydney talked about what we're for, there was a piece of me that came back to so much of this is grounded in how we define the work of creating the future, and what we really want that work to be advancing. And is it advancing the conversation? Is it advancing the spread of ideas? Is it advancing, that I think we've talked about changing the questions, but perhaps we're getting into some of the tactical components of here's a condition that needs to exist for that to happen, and are we actively working to do that? So being in conversation about ideas seems to be a condition that's vital. And how do we need to conceive of these things like community or intellectual property and community investment, meaning all of us who invest in creating the future and its ideas, and what that means to us, the avenue that we're traveling and doing that. So I know that's opening up a really big thing, but it's clarifying for me where we are picking up pieces about the focus of the organization and what it needs to advance.
Yeah, beautiful. I want to share a couple of reflections that Jonas said, that one of the things that he said, which is a quote of himself out of a YouTube that he linked to, is we respect authors, not the institution of copyright. And all of what you would extrapolate out of 140 characters in that, the intellect versus the property. He also said that what's standing out for him is how a simple Twitter search at the right time can connect you to awesome conversations. So we're very, very grateful that you were here. And Susan's reflection is Gail's shift to the positive is revelatory and shows creating the future in action.
Yay. No others, Rebecca or Lisa?
Not at this moment.
Okay. Well, I'll give mine then, and hopefully they'll weigh in before then. The thing, I always sit with my highlighter, and with one of the things that needed to be highlighted for me today was the idea that the question that I posed in our agenda was, how do you build community around the idea of intellectual property, because they seem so in contrast with each other. And so it was the moment when we started to talk about what do we do when somebody doesn't attribute, and what would we want them to do. And what I wrote on my page was, we want to challenge them to improve the thing, not just replicate it. And I think that's how you build community around the idea. And so the takeaway for me is, now we've created a...
No.
Where'd you go, Gail?
No. We missed the good stuff. And the killer was...
The thing is, if she's frozen, she's not being recorded.
I know.
Maybe she'll come back.
Make up what we think she's saying.
She'll have to write it.
Butler with the candlestick in the kitchen.
Colonel Mustard. Well, I hate to say that it is the close of the meeting, and hopefully Gail will add her reflections in. But with her being gone, I'm going to deeply thank all of you guys.
Wait, there she is.
I'm back. Yeah, sorry, I don't know why that happens to me.
I don't know, but we missed it. It was like you got to the good part, and you went, and the thing that's standing out for me is...
Oh. the piece about challenging versus replicating, and what we've created as a practice for our organization.
Wonderful. Yay.
Okay. No other reflections?
No, we're good.
Okay. So February we'll be coming together. We have not defined our meeting topic yet. I think perhaps there better be a conversation in the listserv about that, folks.
on the Facebook group.
On the Facebook group.
Yes, that's right. Sorry about that. Yes. And
the listserv barely exists anymore.
Yep. And perhaps we could start with creating a pseudonym for Carl Wilding, so that he can participate in that Facebook group.
That would be really nice.
To be Carl Wilding. That'd be good. How about Jane Austen? Would you?
Do we have to attribute that?
And I was going to go with Charles Darwin.
Arthur Dent. It would be Arthur Dent.
Oh yeah, Arthur Dent. That'd be good.
Bring your pal wherever you go.
Yeah. Anyway, so let's find ourselves that conversation topic for our February meeting. But thank you all for everything that you've contributed today.
It's very powerful. This will be very, very practical and very powerful. Thank you, guys.
Absolutely. And the folks who have traveled along with us for the last 2 hours on the Twitter stream, really appreciate your time. And we'll look forward to seeing all of you. Sydney, welcome back.
Yes.
Good to be back.
Yeah, we'll see you in February. And everybody else, take care. Have a great month.
Thank you, guys.
Adios.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.